was just
Okay.
This was just the beginning and the presentation of myself and what I'm here to do. So I will start with my goals and the researchers. I think that it will be best if I put like this. I can't see my screen if I show like a presentation. So if it's okay, I will show like this.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, in 2024, Brazilian celebrated the 10th anniversary of its anti-corruption law. So naturally, we started to see behind and to see the numbers of the application of this legislation and to see what is in place now. And people are asking, what have the law really achieved and what is the root and the culture if had changed things here in Brazil, and has Brazilian made progress or failed in the short time in fighting corruption. And perhaps that the most important is what we have to see in the future and the next 10 years. So this was the subject of my research, and this law was a groundbreaking here because for the first time it introduced a corporate liability for acts of corruption. We had several legislation before, but any of them looked to companies and to sanction them for this practice. We just had criminal laws and sanctions against people and individuals related to biddings and bribings and illicit payments related with public administration. So my research explores this very question. Has Brazilian fight against corruption in the past decade being a really or rhetorical? And what's truly changed in this past decade? I will start here seeing this index that is very recognized from everybody, and we talked about this data in a few other research during the conference, but it's important to be the base of my research because this analysis rightly recognized the benchmarking of corruption perceptions index by Transparency International. This index obviously evaluates the different level of public sector corruption in 180 countries. And in 2024 edition, Brazil scored the 34 points that was the marking of the lowest score in the past decade. And this is very significant to us because of the 10th anniversary of our law that I mentioned at the beginning. And Transparency International report points out that this poor performance is related to institutional setbacks, political interferences, impunity, and high profile of corruption cases in Brazil, erosion of transparency mechanisms, and limited access to public information, and also the private sector compliance and compliancy with this system. But what I'm trying to bring to you, it's other data to explore this scenario and to reflect the reality and what we achieved in this past years. So does this declines in score necessarily means that corruption in Brazil has increased? Corruption is really bigger here or not? In Brazil, corruption is typically involves significant arms and public administration, and often through illicit advantage granted by private companies in public contracts. So we don't have here any imputation or sanctions against private corruption. So we are talking here about public corruptions. And because of this, I will look for the enforcement of this legislation, looking to fines and sanctions other and against companies. If I see that this is getting bigger and better, I think that it's the opposite what the index, Transparency International Index, is showing to us. So the crucial point and aspect that I have to mention here is that the anti-corruption law, this framework, enforce an anti-corruption legislation and introduce the strict liability for legal entities involved in corruption against the public administration. And the consequences are this. If recognized as a part of the corruption, a company can be receive a fine from 0.1% to 20% of the company's gross revenue, and also an extraordinary publication of the sanction decision in our public official data and public news. So under this law, the company can be held accountable, and this corporate liability is seen and can be observed by the administrative accountability procedure that here I call as PAR or PAR, that is our proceeding to evaluate if the company can be held as a part or not in the commitment of this illicit, the corruption. Although the PARs are not exclusively initiated to investigate violations of corruption, all such proceedings involves the mismanagement of public funds. And the most cases are related to anti-corruption legislation. And here I jumped to and take a step back to look for our timeline of anti-corruption efforts here in Brazil. And this journey I separate here in two phases. One is before and other is after 2014. And before 2014, we see here fragmented and enforcement of and fragmented weakness and very low and ineffective measures against corruption. We had several compromises and international conventions that Brazil was already signed, but in the improvement, we didn't see any effective in practice. But in 2013, we had the anti-corruption law and also another legislation that is very important, that is deal with conflict of interest. And we note that this is a turning point. So in 2014, marked a decisive turning point in Brazil anti-corruption landscape. Three measures developed this effort. And one of those that I haven't mentioned already was the Operation Lava Jato, or the car wash, that began the same time or very near of the anti-corruption legislation. So what I propose here is to see if this legal and institutional stuff placed in Brazil is a central and a global anti-corruption discussion. And here I chose this illustration that is Tarsila do Amaral painting that shows an egg, and it's not an accident. I invite you to ask if Operação Lava Jato or car wash was the egg or the chicken of anti-corruption Brazil's movement. We also say or have references to Lava Jato, but we knew during other presentations in conference that nowadays Operação Lava Jato is not in place. They stopped and ended the investigations. They have sanctions that are being applied, are being in view, but had a statement that Operação Lava Jato ended. But we know that Brazilians' efforts against anti-corruption haven't stopped, but how we can measure this, and numbers show us that after Operação Lava Jato, we had a huge increase in the numbers of PARs, the administrative proceedings against companies involving other operation and other commitments, other illicits. And between 2014 and 2017, we can see that our administrative organization, this CGU, that is the Controller Office, started 198 PARs. But during the period of 2020 and 2023, this number jumped to 1,063 PARs. These total amounts, the fines that were paid, has been evaluated at amount of exceed R$1 billion. So in the past decade, we have this amount as a fine that were applied here. And this that I consider the most important data of my research is the evaluation of anti-corruption numbers related to an overview of the PARs that were started and also the sanctions that were applied. Here we can see in blue the number of PARs that were started in each year from 2014 for 2024. And in red, we can see the numbers of sanctions that penalties that were applied to against companies. And this could be fines or even the interruption of celebrating contracts with or agreements with public administration, or those sanctions related to the publicity of the wrongdoing. So here we can see that we have a difference in the number of PARs that were started and the PARs that were ended, or the efficiency through the applicable of the sanctions. But during the pandemic, we had this problem. Administration was looking for other aspects, and we also had the increase of numbers of PARs started, and we have a lot of them that were related to COVID contracts and all that scenario. And nowadays we have a more efficient system, because we have a number of PARs that are started, but also the sanctions has been applied, and it's more efficient that I evaluate. So here what we have is 1,879 PARs were initiated since 2014, and those fines that were applied that I mentioned before are over R$1 billion. What we can see is here in this chart and this graphic, this image, is the distribution of PARs outcomes. So those that were ended, we have here are concluded. We have here 47% as conviction, and also can be seen as early judgment and lenience agreement. They also apply in this group because are part of the cases in which companies had been evaluated and have been sanctioned. Here in early judgment and lenience agreement are different kinds of ending the procedure, but it's also the end of one. And just 25% was closed or a filing as they didn't observe any illicit. So it is a great number of it and reflects the fight that CGU and other federal organizations are dealing with the application of anti-corruption law. This other image that I bring shows that is not only CGU. CGU is the Office of Comptroller General and the highest and more important organization here in Brazil that plays against corruption and have this importance, but PARs can be started by other ministries or other authorities, federal authorities. And these are the numbers of PARs that were started by other organizations. So what we see here is that other parts of administration are able to sanction and able to investigate companies. So going to the fifth, the anti-corruption culture in Brazil and private sector. Since that we saw those data, here I was looking for the evidence of a cultural transformation with sanctions, with investigation, what came after the application of Brazilian anti-corruption law. So I brought here KPMG 6 edit of company maturity survey in Brazil, and it evaluate many companies, and they gave me such data that I couldn't be able to do by myself, and I think that this is a good report to be in place for evaluate the compliance in Brazil. And what the research shows is that Brazilian anti-corruption law has driven a private company to adopt integrity programs, code of conducts, and compliance policies. So many organizations that were previously lacked or had any integrity structure have, since the implementation of this of this legislation, implemented compliance departments, whistleblower channels, and due diligence process. Another fact that is important to know is the sanction criteria. The existence of an effective integrity program can be considered by our legislation as a mitigation factor. So it incentivizes companies to adopt a good compliance program, because if they were subject to the application of administrative sanctions, these fines could be lower if the compliance program is evaluated as a good compliance, or if effective or a good program. So the strict liability, the law establishes as the legal entities can be held liable for harmful acts and have this strict liability against the public administration. So KPMG shows us and brings us some informations that 80% of the companies reported that they are adopting the tone of the top, and they are making sure that this integrity culture is in place and has been adopted. And this represents a 20% increase compared with 2014, 50, yeah, indicators, significant culture and huge appreciation of our compliance programs here. So only 3% of the surveys companies started that they don't have any compliance function. This shows us that the reality of companies were improved in the past decade, and they are investing in more integrity, in more ethics, and making shorter the opportunities to do wrong things with public administration, and that they are really scared of being one of those numbers of companies that were sanctioned. So going to the end of my presentation, what we saw doing with this data is that over the past decade, Brazil has made remarkable progress in offering anti-corruption law in the private sector. One of the most important shifts we've seen is that the transformation of how companies perceived the risk and the engagement against corruption. The commitment and application of sanctions under anti-corruption law has been set a clear message that corruption does have consequences for private companies. We have problems related to the sanctions that have to be applied to individuals, but in this focus, we are sure that we have great numbers to show here, and this have been fundamental to change the old behavior and the culture of companies in past years. So as a result, we've seen the significant increase in the adoption of compliance programs, international controls, and integrity policies, internal integrity policies. But we are not seeing the reflection of it in our society or for our society. And this brings us to the beginning of the presentation. This is not reflected here. People are not aware of this arrangement because here we don't have an education. What is the anti-corruption efforts? The whole piece of it, they are looking just for newspaper, and if somebody steals in jail or not, if it's more a naming thing, an individual thing that our society here and Brazilians are looking for, and this reflects in this perception index, and this is really bad. I've seen some research that are criticizing this index and proposing other ways of evaluating it, but we know that Transparency International is still one of the most important data to economy, to investments and other things. And what we see is the incompatibility or the difference of the numbers and the efforts that has been done in the past year can reflect in Brazilian economy, because it's not fair, or it's not aligned with our efforts. So bringing to the end, I'm thank you, and I'm really great to be here and able to exchange experience and talk about this topic. I will be very pleasant to hear comments, please.
Thank you, Isabela. It was super interesting to see this, especially to see evidence of how anti-corruption laws have working in some countries. So for me, this is super interesting. So questions, please. You can raise your hand or, okay, Flori.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again, and nice to meet you, the ones that I haven't met yet. Thank you so much, Isabela, for your presentation. It was really interesting. I was wondering about your methodology. How do you gather all the information? If you have a central database, or how does it work? And also, I had a question about if there's like a public I don't know English, where I have to translate in my head, so it's hard. Um, like if the institutions have a way of letting know the public the investigations they're having, or like I don't know if we can know what companies have been sanctioned, and if that has an effect on if people buy in these companies, or if they gain public contracts and stuff like that. Thank you.
Great. Well, Florine, my methodology was based on evidence that and data that I were provided by the Brazilian federal government. I send a request of this data and these numbers to by our legislation. We have the one law that is to give us the transparency. But also we have like a Power BI here in Brazil, that is a website in which the federal has to improve and to put these numbers as transparent. So if I want to know nowadays how many PARs were started or are in investigation and were concluded, I can see this now. Everybody can see this, even outside from Brazil. And about the second question, this Power BI, we can see those companies that had already been concluded the procedures, because when the procedure is started, the name of it is public in our Gazette, the official Gazette. But we don't know for what they are being investigated. We know that is under anti-corruption legislation, but we have several hypotheses of what could happen. But we know we can search. It's not a thing that Brazilians do a lot, but lawyers do a lot, or researchers do a lot, is to see this Gazette every day and to be aware of what companies are being investigated. Because of our culture, because of this not aware mechanism, I don't see a really directly impact when it is started, this procedure against a company, and the reflection of a reputational, or the reflection of this in the sales or the company at all. Obviously, in regarding to some subjects, media news journalists, they are looking for it and have been publicating news about the starting of an investigation. But this parse, it's something that I think that I haven't mentioned. Company has to present its defense present evidence and is a procedure that will see if has a lot enough evidence to sanction it. So it can be closed without fines, without evidence that committed the illicit, and can be closed. So I think that it was the question, and say if I can clarify anything else.
Thank you. Now, Stephen?
Thank you, Gabriela. Sorry to call you Gabby early. That was fantastic, Izabela. I really appreciate that, and it's somewhat perplexing, and I think you agree with that it is perplexing. But two things I wanted to mention and kind of ask. The first is that the CPI kind of depends on the views of experts and particularly business executives. So you'd expect, I mean, that's not the public, as you know. So you would almost expect that within those circles, they would know more about this since it's targeting businesses. So that's surprising that it's not reflected in the CPI. Now, it's not surprising that it would be that it's not reflected among the public, but that's a different set of data that you'd have to look at to uncover that. So that's kind of my first. That's what really kind of threw me when you threw that last slide up there about the CPI. But the second thing is, I think you also mentioned earlier that one of the things that they wanted to do with this was to have broad publication. Didn't you mention that, of the investigations and the sanctions? So is that not happening? Do they not widely publicize what's going on?
They widely publicize just the start of this proceeding and just the end of the proceeding. In the end of the proceeding, if it was closed or if was sanctioned. We don't know at the time lapse that between these two events. Public are not aware if how or if the proceeding is going faster or not, and seeing evidence or not. It's not a public proceeding. The public things are just the initiation and the end.
Well, it would be interesting to gauge public opinion around this, and also kind of the way they interpret what's going on, because I think here in the United States, there's so much that people see as the way that businesses are able to escape, responsibility, even though they may, settle out of court, which is what they usually do. There's not a lot of sanctions that go on. So that's the public's perception, at least. So it would be interesting to kind of see that perspective. But this is fascinating work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Luis?
Let me see. It's working, the microphone? Can you hear me? Okay. Two questions, please. One, the first one, sorry. You have in the last year something like 200 PARs on the year, but these PARs refers to all the government instances in Brazil. You see, just like the cities, the governments, the federal institutions, and so on.
These are just federals, just federals.
Just the federal ones, okay.
Yeah.
It's not a very big number, taking in account the size of the budget. But you see, they are growing steadily. And in one of these years, we had a change on the way the budget is executed in Brazil. Can you relate the increase with the way they start to spend the budget through the congressmen assignations of budgeting? Because now in Brazil, more than half of the national budget is executed through pork belly laws or something like this. I don't remember how they call it here in the US, but it's something like pork belly laws. The assignment that the congressman put in the national budget, and they are executed locally. So I'm not sure if you can identify if the increase was because of this, should be a good thing, or it's just a matter of the institutions working even slowly, but working a little bit better. The other thing, it has a little bit to do with what you said about Lava Jato, but not in the sense of the operation per se, but in the sense of your opinion in this case on the effect of the lawfare and the perception of corruption. Because when the lawfare is an instrument of politics, corruption starts to be something like day-to-day discussions, and sometimes you have the corrupt of yourself. So the lawfare increases and the one is corrupted just because he's on the opposition or just because he's in the government. And so part of the population starts to see corruption as just part of the politics as they are on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not sure if it's what is happening in Brazil right now. So if you're on the group of the actual government, you say no, there was no corruption. This is something like everyday life. Things just work this way because they always work this way. It's a little bit complicated, I know, but sometimes it looks like it's undermining the anti-corruption institutionality that I thought it was working fine. So you see, the PARs are growing, so it should be working in any way. But in the other side, you see in the public vision, like something is not working fine. Sorry for the broken English.
No, and we are together in this. Well, Luis, I think that you brought a lot of information that I don't know if I'm able to bring here conclusions, but I can bring here some informations as to exchange and see what we can bring from it. Related to what we call here the orçamento secreto, it's the money that we can't control and that are nowadays being criticized related to politicals that they have a huge amount that we don't know where it goes and for what it goes, and that has a huge criticizes and critical situation, because for sure it is being used to corruption, to practice of corruption. But we don't have any visibility of the programs that have been paid related to this. And I have to mention that this is not something that I deeply study. It's not an object that I deeply study, because here my practice is from the other side. And what I want to see is the other side, because in the first place, what we saw here in Brazil is that private companies were paying for the bribes and were related with the bribes. And after 2014, together with those legislations that I mentioned, also in the year after, our superior court sanctioned a determination that companies couldn't pay to politics and elections. So that, which were one of the ways of the to justify or not justify those bribes. So I look more to the straight and to the regulation of public of private sector to decrease and to be lower the chances of money paid in by those entities. But here we have problems even researching public public efforts and public money because we don't have this visibility. So related with your first question, for sure, the perception, the population perception can be lower because of this and because of the individual that were related to Lava Jato and are not more in jail. But I think that we talk too much about of this, that is obvious important thing, but we don't talk about the measures that have been improved and the culture of integrity that has been here in Brazil in the past years. And about the second question, the effect of lawfare and the perceptions, the numbers, here back to our data, I don't know if I have the answer. I don't have the answer at all, but what I can comment here is that in this year, 2018, we had our presidential election. Here in this year, we had it was one of the most important elections that we had in the past years because in one side we had Jair Bolsonaro, which were a president that talked a lot about fighting corruption and everything at all. And he is from what we call here the right, a politician from the right. And the other hand, in this year, my actual president that nowadays is Lula. Here in 2018, he was in jail because of Lava Jato. So we had Jair Bolsonaro in one hand and another guy that it's not an important name for our politic here in the right hand. And we had here a number that it was a great number for that time. But what we saw is the decrease of the sanctions, of the application of anti-corruption legislation. And I have to remember that here we elected that political Jair Bolsonaro, which the election had as the most famous thing, the fight of corruption. And we see here that they started the almost 300 PARs, but he haven't sanctioned too many companies. What shows me that in this year the practice was not effective. And here in 2022, we had another election. And this time it was also Jair Bolsonaro in one hand and Lula. He was and he is out of the jail nowadays. Here in this and in the next years, we have those numbers for PARs. We know that nowadays even the fact that we elected Lula as as our president, this is a huge information for for Brazilians, and this influence the index of perception, because a person that were in jail at the past years, now he is back to president, and we have a lot of news and fake news about it. So we have a lot of information involved in this, but different of and also different from the other governments before this period. And we know that nowadays here and in even 2050 and 25, Congress is the opposite of our president. So even we have a president that has some politics, some intentions to fight corruption, what we know is that orçamento secreto that we mentioned in the first topic, that is those money that we don't know for what it is paid for the opposite, because he has to buy and pay for favorites. So we are not in a good situation for public improvements or to sanction new legislation, because it's very hard to the government in nowadays and to be able to improve anything.
Thank you, Isabela. Are there other questions? Nicolas Lagos.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much. Congrats, Isabela, for this great presentation. I'm originally from Chile, and that's very interesting to know the Brazilian experience, because it's a large country. So you have a lot of experience in many things. So it's something that is very always interesting to hear. So I'm focused on the Supreme Audit Institution. That is the field of my knowledge, that's auditing. So I'm curious to know about what is your perception in this anti-corruption system of the TCU. So what is the role? Because during the last years, this kind of institution are moving from only being focused on financial audits towards more anti-corruption audits or performance audits. So how do you think is the role in these anti-corruption efforts, and if there's any way to because TCU is a role model for the rest of organizations in Latin America. So I'm curious to know if that is the same in the subnational level, for instance. So, and in the anti-corruption perspective.
Great.
Thanks.
It's a great question, and also a huge answer that I should give you. But here I mentioned that the PERs are started by, can be started by the official Controller General that we call CGU. And TCU, it's not involved in these procedures, but they are involved at the end to see if the fines were okay, if like in the leniency agreement, that is like a play bargain here. So just the part is the company. After all, CGU has to show to TCU to see if they agree that the arrangement and the negotiation were okay. TCU here, we have a lot of comments about, because it's a huge organization. We have in a federal level the TCU, but also in states level, we have TCS, that is for states. And they audit and control the public money expense. So in those cases related to leniency agreement, what we saw in the past years was not amicus, not CGU was not in the same place of TCU. They fight a lot. about the application of this legislation, because everyone wanted to be in the table negotiating and being able to evaluate if it was a great deal or not, and not in every time they were agreed one with each other. So public administration was not in the same place for the past years. But it's a new thing that I think that the past 2 months, CGU, other organizations, and also TCU signed a memorandum agreeing and establishing greater mechanisms to celebrate those lenience agreements, and they are trying, or they are showing that they are in the same place now to fight against corruption. An important thing that I see related to TCU, and it's different from CGU, is that CGU, most of those people that work in and make the decisions in CGU, they are public officials. That here in Brazil, you have to take a test, and it's very difficult. And it's your career. You are a public official. To TCU, it's more a political place. You have those, they are public servants, but they aren't the ministers. They are not the hugest and the most the guys that made the decisions. Those are indicated by politicals, and this is a thing that concerns me, because have political influences more than CGU. So we know that it's an important organ that had achieved important decisions, and it's for sure essential for us, but have this political aspect that should concerns us.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabela. Well, we'll have more time now, but thank you very much. It was super, super interesting to see this data, to see the analysis that you have been conducted here in Brazil. Yeah, looking forward to see you in the next ACA Forum, so probably in the ACA conference.
Thank you very much for this
Yeah,
space.
thank you
Thank
for
you
the
for the question.
presentation. No, thank you for the presentation. So, goodbye. See you next month. Next month is going to be in the last Friday of July. We will have the next presentation. I will send you a message with, as usual, with the next when we had the next presentation ready. So, thank you very much. Bye.
Gracias, nos vemos.
Adios.